Ring of Fire, bread and butter.
Hello.
So, you started playing Stoneshard, and you wanna be a mage. What do? Well, you could pick any of the starting characters, but Jonna is the only one that has started with mage skills. Currently available, we have Pyromancy, we have Electromancy, we have Geomancy, and we have Magic Masteries. So how do you rank those skills? I am going to look at their usefulness as a level 1 character. You leave Osbrock, you start on your path, and then what? It's not always very obvious on how to deal with the environment outside, and so what we're going to need from the skills is something that can kill, something that can protect, and something that is generally not going to put you in too much danger, assuming you're safe. So here is QQ's look at what the ranking of those skills. We're gonna rank them as great skills. Oh my god, you have to have them. They're doing amazing job. Useful skills, things that keep on showing up and you keep on using it. Decent skills, which are it's there, it's decent, you need to level up, but it's not, mind-blowingly good. And then useful later, which are skills which grow in power the longer your character is alive, the higher level it is. So we're gonna look at Baptism by Fire. This spell gives you a little bit of pyromatic power for enemies around. It's useful later, and the fights become big. At the beginning, you're gonna be fighting one wolf, 1 or 2 goons. That's not very, very important. It also grants fire resistance, so useful later. Dissipation is another skill that I would consider being useful later. This gives you magic and nature resistance for 5 turns after you take magic or natural damage, plus replenish some energy. At the beginning you won't be taking magical damage because enemies are not doing enough. There's some in the Vampire Dungeon, there's a little bit of casters in the Skeleton Dungeons, but overall it's not enough to be worth it spending one of the first points you have. You start with 2, level 2 you get 1, so you have 3. I wouldn't take this skill until later. Fire Barrage is bread and butter for the Pyromancer, the Fire Mage. It's a really useful skill, lots of damage, lots of utility. You can shoot the bolts of fire onto the ground to light it on fire, and once they're on fire, you can kite them, reignite them. Very useful in the dungeons, very useful outside. Highly recommended, great skill to have. Next one is Flame Saturation. It's a tricky one. It's a decent skill. It removes some of the energy cost for each ignited enemy, but considering you only have Fire Barrage and Fire Ring to ignite things on fire, it's going to be useful later skills. Eventually you will have to take it to progress to a tier 2 unless you find the treaties. Put it in useful later rather than useful now. Next one we have Impulse. Is a fantastic spell with couple downsides. The fantastic part is if it triggers on the enemies, they will start getting knocked back, they will start taking damage. It's great for crowd control, it's great for removing immediate danger from up close to you. The downsides of it, you have to be next to you when you cast it, and it does only 2 damage to begin with. Once you level up your spells, it does a little bit more. Once you remove shock resistance, it does a little bit more. It's not great because things have to get close. So if you have a wolf, you are stuck having the wolf getting next to you, and if the knockback doesn't trigger, you kind of screwed. Again, if you're Electromancer, you only have 2 skills to begin with, so you're probably going to take both. But overall, if I was building a multi-skill mage, I would consider Impulse to be a useful tier spell. Jolt is bread and butter for Electromancer. The damage isn't great. Base damage is about 7, where the Fire Barrage does 3 times 6, so half the damage. It has a little bit of chance of knockback. It does have a chance to apply resonance, remove shock resistance, remove control, etc, etc, etc. Has a cooldown of 2 turns, which is the good part. And it's relatively cheap, so you can use it to finish things off. I would put it slightly less useful than Fire Barrage, but again, if you're an Electromancer, bread and butter, you're gonna be using it a lot. Next one we have Precise Movements. Is a decent skill, right? So Precise Movement, it gives you a backfire chance, lower per spell, remaining the same tile removes backfire chance. So it's a decent skill. Was it going to be useful later? Yes, very much so. But at the beginning, for the first couple levels, effects are not there to stack up, so it's not useful. As much as dissipation will definitely be useful later, precise movements, if you're not a caster, there is not much you can use it for. Alright, Ring of Fire, bread and butter. It's great for positioning. It confuses the AI. Sometimes things will walk into the fire, realize that they're on fire, walk out of it, giving you an extra opportunity for an attack. It has a good chance to light things on fire. It lights the ground on fire around you, which is great. Downside is you won't be able to escape. Upside is if things walk in, they will catch on fire, and then Fire Barrage does more damage. It is a really fast spell. It's not as good as Fire Barrage, but the utility there is definitely there. Next one we have Runic Boulder. There is a base spell for Geomancers, bread and butter, short cooldown, but some downsides. You have to manually destroy boulders, which takes a turn. They eat up energy per turn, so on and so forth. Upside, they do decent damage, 5 damage. They have a high chance of knockback, and you can hit things into boulders. So you can use a boulder to knock off an enemy to another boulder. Then you can put another boulder and just ping pong things around. In small rooms, small corridors in the dungeons, Runic Boulder can do a lot of fantastic things. And once you get to level 5 and you get your tier 2, Runic Boulder becomes really, really powerful. So that's why I would put in great skills. Again, I like Jolt better than the Runic Boulder because of how long it takes to deal with the Runic Boulder. Cast, destroy, eats up mana in between, so Geomancers are usually they're very quickly out of energy. Next thing we have Sea of Finesse, removes backfire chance, fumble chance, backfire damage, cooldown duration, so it's very utilitarian as such, and it promotes you standing still. But I think overall it's a decent skill. It's probably better than precise movements, but it's not a skill that I would flock to it like, oh my god, this is the skill to be had. It definitely helps. In the long run, it will probably help out things stack up. So if you're stationary and just go out artillery style into enemies, that definitely worth the points. But at the beginning, in your first 3 points, 2-3 points, I wouldn't take it unless you have nothing else to take. Say you're an Electromancer and you don't want to take a melee skill. Second to last is Seal of Power, is a useful spell. Seal of Power increases magic power, increases weapon damage, gives you bonus range, and then depending on which spell you cast from each skill, you get precise bonuses. Usually that means specific power, which again the game tells you that if you take it, you're probably going to be specializing into a specific skill. So Pyromancy gives you fire damage, gives you crit chance, Electromancy gives you negative fumble and backfire, and Geomancy gives you block and damage change. So each one of them is slightly tailored, all of give you magic power. It has a long cooldown, it's relatively expensive, but you can prolong into spells, which means that once you start pulling, you cast Seal of Power and then you can keep on benefiting from it. So it's a useful skill. And then lastly we have Stone Armor, which activates for 3 turns and gives you whole level of bonuses, and if you get beat up, eventually that damage is going to be exposed when the Stone Armor expires. It's a useful skill regardless if you're a caster or not. Geomancy only has 2 starting skills, so I would consider it as a very decent spell, maybe even a useful spell. It all depends on where you think you're going to be using. If you're going Geomancer, you have Runic Boulder and the Stone Armor, and that's it. But maybe I should put it in useful skills, not a very useful skill, but a useful skill. Again, you don't want to get hit as Jonna at the beginning, because she's very fragile, but... So here's my tier list for a level 1 mage, level 1, level 2 mage in 0.8 patch of Stoneshard. Thank you, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye bye.